The rain over New York does not fall, it collapses. It turns the neon signage of the Continental Hotel into blurred smears of cobalt and crimson against the asphalt. High above the street, on the skeletal girders of a half-finished skyscraper, the air screams. It is not the wind. It is a structural failure of reality. A rift of white-hot kinetic energy tears open 6 inches above a pallet of reinforced rebar. There is no magical chime. There is only the sound of a vacuum being filled by 300 pounds of displaced matter and meat. The pallet groans. The wood splinters under the sudden, impossible weight. Bruce Wayne exhales, a ragged, wet sound that rattles deep in a chest cavity, widened by years of manual labor and untreated fractures. He does not scramble for footing, he anchors. His boots, heavy-soled and caked in the dust of a different Gotham, bite into the steel. He is a mountain of brutalist architecture. He is 6 feet 6 inches of scar tissue and tactical intent, wrapped in a cape that isn't silk or memory cloth, but a heavy, oil-stained weighted shroud designed to crush as much as conceal. He reaches back. His hand, calloused and thick-knuckled, closes around the handle of the tool. It is a massive, blackened felling axe, its head shaped like the jagged wings of a scavenger. 20 stories below, a black Mercedes S-Class pulls to a rhythmic stop. 2 men in Italian-cut suits step out. They move with the synchronized grace of professional apex predators. One adjusted a cufflink. The other checked the chamber of a suppressed P-30L. They were looking for a ghost. They were looking for a man in a well-tailored suit who used pencils to kill. They were not looking for the thing that just jumped. Bruce doesn't use a grapple. He uses gravity. He steps off the edge. The descent is a controlled fall through the freezing downpour. The wind tears at his cowl, a rough-hewn, intimidating mask of matte black polymer. The X-Veil tracks the descent. 9.8 meters per second squared. The air resistance of the shroud slows the terminal velocity just enough to prevent bone-shattering impact, but not enough to mitigate the kinetic catastrophe about to occur. Bruce slams into the roof of a parked SUV 20 feet from the Mercedes. The sound is a sickening thrum crunch. The sunroof vanishes into a cloud of diamond shards. The suspension of the vehicle dies instantly, the frame bowing toward the pavement. Bruce rolls, the momentum absorbed by his massive shoulders, and comes up in a crouch. The 2 assassins freeze. Their training screams that this is an impossibility, a hallucination in Kevlar and wet canvas. The one with the P-30L reacts first. It is a reflex honed by a decade of high-table contracts. He brings the weapon up. Bruce doesn't wait for the click of the sear. He launches the axe. The heavy steel head spins once through the rain, a blur of dark geometry. It doesn't cut the air. It displaces it with a low-frequency whoomph. The blade catches the assassin mid-sternum. It does not stop. It carries the man backward, his custom-tailored suit blooming with a sudden, violent spray of dark red. The impact pins him to the side of the Mercedes, the axe head burying itself 3 inches into the reinforced doorframe. The man's legs twitch once. His lungs attempt to pull air through a shattered rib cage. They fail. Bruce is already moving. He isn't a ninja. He is a landslide. He closes the gap to the second assassin in 3 strides. The man fumbles for a backup submachine gun beneath his coat. Bruce's hand, large enough to palm a basketball, crushes the man's throat before the weapon can clear the holster. The assassin's eyes do not widen in shock. The capillaries simply burst as the pressure on his windpipe exceeds 80 pounds per square inch. Bruce lifts him. It is an effortless display of raw, blue-collar strength. He slams the man face first into the hood of the car. The metal buckles. the glass of the windshield spiderwebs into 1,000 jagged maps. Bruce retrieves his axe from the door. He pulls it free with a mechanical scree of metal on metal. He looks at the blood on the blade. It's too bright. The light here is different. The air smells of expensive cologne and high-grade gunpowder, not the rot and chemical runoff of his home. He turns his head. His cowl ears catch the sound of a dozen suppressed muzzles sliding into battery within the hotel lobby. Bruce Wayne doesn't hide. He adjusts his grip on the axe. He is a mechanic, and he has just found a world that needs to be dismantled. The copper-heavy scent of the Continental's curb fades, replaced by the suffocating weight of subterranean ozone and wet iron. Bruce Wayne does not use the stairs. He drops into a ventilation shaft, his 300-pound frame descending with the calculated precision of a wrecking ball. The X-Veil tracks the deceleration. He flares the weighted shroud, the heavy fabric catching the upward draft like a leaden parachute, slowing his velocity just enough to land on the rusted catwalk of the A-train line without buckling the steel. He moves through the dark with a gait that is less like a man and more like a tectonic shift. Every 15 seconds, a rhythmic thrum-thrum vibrates through the soles of his boots, the heartbeat of a city built on top of itself. Bruce stops at a junction box near the 14th Street station. His hands, thick and grease-stained, move with the practiced efficiency of a master technician. He isn't looking for a computer port. He is looking for the structural blueprints of the city's nervous system. He wrenches the metal cover off the box, the screws shearing under the raw torque of his grip. He studies the wiring. It's too pristine. In his Gotham, the infrastructure was a necrotic mess of layered failures. Here, the cables are color-coded, shielded, and maintained with a religious, cult-like obsession. This is not a public utility. This is the private circulatory system of an empire. A shadow detaches itself from the far end of the tunnel. It is a man wrapped in a tattered Carhartt jacket, a half-eaten pretzel in one hand and a radio in the other. He is a Bowery scout, one of the King's 1,000 eyes. He has seen monsters in the dark before. He has seen the Baba Yaga emerge from the shadows with a bloodied pencil. But he has never seen a mountain that breathes. The scout freezes. His heart rate spikes to 120 beats per minute. He reaches for a gold coin tucked into his pocket, a reflex of a man seeking the protection of the only God the city recognizes. "Don't," Bruce says. The voice is a low-frequency rumble that vibrates in the scout's sternum. It isn't the theatrical growl of a vigilante. It's the sound of a foreman telling a worker to step back from a live wire. Who the hell are you?" The scout's hand trembles. "You're not Table. You're not with the director." Bruce steps into the flickering amber light of a distant emergency lamp. The matte black polymer of his cowl reflects nothing. The axe hangs from a magnetic clamp on his thigh. The dried blood of the High Table assassins, a dark, crusty topographical map on the steel. "I'm the guy who's going to dismantle the table," Bruce says. He reaches out and plucks the gold coin from the scout's nerveless fingers. He holds it up to the light. He doesn't see currency. He sees a structural flaw. "This isn't money. It's a leash. Who issues these?" The scout swallows hard, his throat clicking in the silence. The mint, under the table. You can't just walk in there, man. That's not how the world works. There are rules, markers, blood oaths. Rules are just blueprints for people who are too afraid to build something new. Bruce replies. He tosses the coin back. It hits the scout's chest with the weight of a spent bullet. "Tell your king, the man in the suit didn't kill those people at the hotel. I did, and I'm looking for the foundation." Bruce turns, his shroud swirling around him like a heavy dark tide. He begins to move deeper into the tunnels, toward the subterranean hubs where the High Table's logic begins to fail. He starts to run. Not a sprint, but a heavy rhythmic lope that eats the distance. The physics of this world are too clean, Bruce realizes. The gravity feels slightly lighter, the friction of the air less resistant than the smog-choked pressure of his home universe. He tests it. He leaps toward a high-tension power line, grabs the insulator, and swings. The momentum is effortless. He is a predator who has spent his whole life training in a high-gravity hellscape, now unleashed in a world of glass and silk. He reaches a transit hub beneath a financial district. Through a crack in the masonry, he watches a cleanup crew in sterile yellow jumpsuits systematically erasing the carnage he left behind. They move with a terrifying bureaucratic silence. They aren't hiding a crime. They are maintaining an illusion. Bruce watches the way they communicate, subtle hand signals, encrypted earpieces. He begins to map the hierarchy. The workers fear the supervisors. The supervisors fear the phone calls. The phone calls come from the Continental, and the Continental serves the table. He pulls a heavy industrial-grade wrench from his belt. It's a simple tool, but in his hands it's a pry bar for reality. He jams it into a primary gear system for the station's ventilation, the metal screaming as he forces the mechanism to grind to a halt. The systemic alarm begins to chime, a polite melodic sound that masks the panic starting to ripple through the local high-table node. The systemic awakening has begun. Bruce isn't hiding in the shadows anymore. He is becoming the shadow that the table can't explain away with a gold coin. He looks up at the ceiling, sensing the weight of the skyscrapers above him. He can feel the city's pulse. It's accelerating. Somewhere in a room filled with ancient ledgers and high-resolution monitors, a name is being searched for. They won't find one. Bruce Wayne doesn't exist here. There is only the axe and the shroud. He adjusts his cowl. The air is getting colder. The hunt is moving from the streets to the soul of the machine. The air in the Bowery King's subterranean cathedral is a thick, stagnant soup of pigeon guano, wet newsprint, and the electrical hum of 1,000 illicit servers. It is a space designed to be invisible, a sanctuary built within the city's discarded lungs. The X-Veil observes the atmosphere, 78% humidity, the scent of copper and cheap gin, and the frantic, rhythmic flutterflap of wings against wire mesh. The Bowery King sits upon his throne of reclaimed mahogany and iron. He is a man who turned being nothing into an empire. He is currently feeding a gray pigeon, his fingers moving with a grace that belies the scars on his neck. The silence is not broken, it is crushed. A rhythmic, metallic clack hiss echoes from the high-maintenance shaft 40 feet above the throne. The heavy steel grating, a 400-pound slab of reinforced iron, does not fall. It is pulled upward into the dark. Bruce Wayne descends. He does not use a silk rope. He uses a rusted industrial-grade steel cable hooked to a manual winch he's anchored into the bedrock above. The descent is slow, agonizingly deliberate, and heavy. The cable groans under his mass. The Bowery King does not move, but the bird in his hand takes flight, sensing a predator whose weight distorts the very air. Bruce hits the concrete floor with a sound like a slab of granite being dropped from a crane. The impact radiates through the room, a low-frequency vibration that makes the whiskey in the king's glass ripple. The shadows around the room shift. A dozen men in rags, armed with suppressed submachine guns and tactical knives, emerge from the alcoves. They are the invisible army. They are the friction of the street. "You," the Bowery King says, his voice a rich, theatrical gravel. The man who threw an axe through a high-table hit squad in a German-engineered sedan. "You've caused quite the stir in my kingdom, mister." Bruce does not answer. He stands, the weighted shroud of his cape dragging across the floor with the sound of a shovel through gravel. He doesn't look at the king. He looks at the ceiling. He looks at the support pillars, oxidized steel encased in crumbling 1920s concrete. The western pillar is failing, Bruce says. His voice is a blunt instrument. 3 degrees of tilt. The vibration from the subway line above is liquefying the silt beneath the foundation. In 6 months, this room becomes a tomb. The king's smile doesn't falter, but his eyes sharpen. He leans forward. I deal in information, not architecture, giant. You walked into my home. You bypassed my scouts. You didn't use the coins. You didn't use the markers. You're a ghost in a suit of armor that looks like it was forged in a shipyard. Bruce takes a step forward. The scouts tighten their grips. The X-veil tracks the tension. 24 muzzles leveled at Bruce's center mass. Bruce reaches into his tool belt. The motion is slow, non-threatening to a professional, but the scouts flinch. He pulls out a heavy-duty laser-etched thermal scanner, a piece of custom engineering he built to find cracks in Gotham's levees. He clicks it on. A grid of red light washes over the king's throne. I'm not a ghost, Bruce says. I'm the Foreman, and your invisible empire is built on a structural lie. He tosses the thermal scanner onto the king's lap. The screen shows the heat signatures of the men in the walls, but more importantly, it shows the stress fractures in the rock above them. The table owns the buildings, Bruce continues, his voice gaining a cold, analytical edge. They own the utilities. They own the air you're breathing. You think you're a king because you have the scraps? You're just a tenant they haven't evicted yet. The Bowery king picks up the scanner. He looks at the red-mapped fractures. And what do you want, Mr. Architect? A seat at my table? A gold coin for your silence? Bruce reaches back and unslings the felling axe. He doesn't raise it. He leans on it like a staff. I don't want your coins. Gold is soft. It's a decorative metal. I want the blueprints for the Continental's vault. A low chuckle starts in the king's chest and erupts into a dry, hacking laugh. The vault? You want to rob the high table? You want to break into the one place where the rules are written in blood and stored in titanium? You're not a ghost. You're a suicide note. I don't rob, Bruce says. He takes another step. A scout moves to intercept him, placing a hand on Bruce's armored chest. Bruce doesn't punch. He moves his shoulder forward 2 inches, a kinetic shunt utilizing his 260-pound frame. The scout is sent sprawling backward, his breath leaving him in a sharp woof of air as if he'd been hit by a low-speed freight train. I dismantle, Bruce says, staring directly into the king's eyes. I've spent my life looking at how things are built so I can find the one point that makes them fall. Your king is a man who hides in the dirt. My king was a man who built the city with his bare hands before the rats took it. I'm taking it back. The Bowery king stands. He is a foot shorter than Bruce, but he carries the weight of the city's secrets. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out a marker, a heavy silver medallion that opens with a click to reveal a bloodied thumbprint. This is a blood oath, the king whispers. It is the only thing that matters in this world. It is the physics of our reality. Bruce reaches out. He takes the marker. He doesn't look at the name. He places it on the edge of the king's mahogany table. He brings the butt of the axe down on it with the force of a hydraulic press. The silver shatters. The hinge snaps. The blood-stained interior is crushed into a meaningless smear of metal and dust. The room goes silent. The scouts audibly gasp. In this universe, that act is a theological heresy. The physics of your reality just change, Bruce says. Blueprints. Now. Or I find the load-bearing pillar for this entire block, and I take the Bowery down with the table. The Bowery king looks at the ruined silver on his table. He looks at the man mountain in the matte black cowl. For the first time in a decade, The king feels the genuine, cold thrill of structural instability. "Tick-tock," the king says softly, looking at his men. "Get this man a map and a cup of very bad coffee. We have a world to break." The rain over lower Manhattan has transitioned from a rhythmic drizzle into a pressurized industrial deluge. The X-Veil filters the sound, the low-frequency thrum of the city's heart, the hiss of steam from a ruptured grate, and the metallic clink, clink, clink of brass casings hitting the wet pavement 3 blocks away. Bruce Wayne moves through a narrow brick-lined alleyway behind the Federal Reserve. He is not running, he is a shadow of displacement. His weighted shroud, now heavy with 3 gallons of absorbed rainwater, acts as a physical stabilizer, keeping his center of gravity low as he maneuvers over the slick, moss-covered cobblestones. He stops. The air pressure in the alley shifts. It is a micro-fluctuation, the sound of a high-end suppressor sliding into a custom-molded Kydex holster. 30 feet ahead, beneath the flickering amber of a failing street lamp, stands a silhouette in a charcoal gray, 3-piece suit. The tailoring is mathematical. The posture is one of a man who has lived his entire life in the recoil. John Wick does not point a weapon. He stands with his hands empty, but his kinetic potential is a coiled spring of lethal geometry. The X-Veil dilates the moment, 0.8 seconds. Bruce's left hand tightens on the hickory handle of his felling axe. His right hand rests on a heavy-duty industrial pry bar, magnetized to his thigh. "You're the one breaking the rules," John says. The voice is a soft, tired rasp, the sound of a man who has walked through a mile of broken glass and is ready for the second mile. "Rules are just the scabbing of a wound," Bruce responds. He steps into the light. His cowl is a brutalist masterpiece of scarred polymer and shadow. "Your table builds a world of gold and blood, then calls it order." "I'm a mechanic, John. I don't see order. I see a machine that's grinding its own gears into dust." John's eyes, dark and weary, track the weight of Bruce's axe. There are consequences for everyone. You can't just walk through the front door and tear it down. "Watch me." John moves. It is a blur of hyper-compressed efficiency. He draws a Kimber warrior with a speed that defies biological reaction. Crack, crack. 2.45 ACP rounds scream through the rain. Bruce doesn't dodge. He pivots. He catches the first round on the reinforced steel bat emblem on his chest, a 3/4-inch slab of industrial plate. The second round grazes the heavy canvas of his shoulder, the kinetic energy absorbed by the weighted shroud. The X-Veil records the impact. 450 foot-pounds of force, neutralized by structural engineering. Bruce closes the gap. He isn't a fencer, he is a siege engine. He swings the axe in a horizontal arc, a low-profile sweep designed to take out the structural supports of a building. John drops into a low crouch, the blade whistling 2 inches above his head, cutting through a cast-iron drain pipe like it was wet paper. John is inside Bruce's guard now. He jams the muzzle of the Kimber into the gap between Bruce's cowl and his shoulder plating. Click. Bruce's hand, thick, calloused, and faster than a man of his mass should be, has already jammed the slide of the pistol. He doesn't strip the gun, he crushes the hand holding it. The sound of metacarpals snapping is a sharp, wet pop over the roar of the rain. John doesn't scream. He breathes out, a sharp hiss of focused pain. He uses the momentum to drive a tactical knife toward the soft seal of Bruce's knee. Bruce counters with a brutalist shunt. He drives his forehead, the hardest part of the cowl, directly into John's nose. The cartilage shatters. John staggers back 3 steps, his vision blurring as the X-Veil tracks the crimson spray mixing with the rainwater. "You're fast," Bruce rumbles, "but you're fighting for a world that's already dead." You're a tool for the architects. I'm the one who pulls the permits for the demolition." John wipes the blood from his mouth. He doesn't reach for another gun. He reaches for a length of piano wire. "I'm just a man who wants to go home. You're the one who won't let the world sleep." The world shouldn't be sleeping. It should be working. Bruce launches the pry bar. It's not a projectile. It's a distraction. John ducks the flying steel, and in that microsecond of diverted focus, Bruce is on him. He doesn't punch. He tackles. 260 pounds of armored mass slams into John Wick, carrying them both through the brick wall of a derelict warehouse. The masonry explodes. Dust and ancient mortar fill the air. They tumble into a graveyard of rusted machinery and discarded copper piping. John recovers first, his gun fu adapting to the cramped, jagged environment. He grabs a discarded iron pipe and swings it with the precision of a master swordsman. Bruce blocks with the shaft of his axe, the vibrations of the impact traveling up his arms and into his teeth. They are no longer fighting over a contract. They are two different philosophies of violence colliding in a basement of forgotten industry. John represents the precision of the elite. Bruce represents the unstoppable force of the laborer. John manages to wrap the piano wire around the neck of Bruce's cowl. He pulls, his boots finding purchase against a rusted boiler. The wire screams against the polymer. Bruce doesn't panic. He feels the oxygen intake drop by 15%. He doesn't reach for the wire. He reaches back, grabs John's suit jacket, and throws himself backward. He slams his entire weight, and John's, into the concrete floor. The floor cracks. John's grip loosens as his spine absorbs the shock. Bruce rolls over, pinning John to the ground with a knee that weighs as much as a sledgehammer. He raises the axe, the blade gleaming under the dim emergency lights of the warehouse. He stops. He sees the look in John's eyes. It isn't fear. It's a deep, structural exhaustion. It's the look of a man who has been used as a tool for so long, he's forgotten he's a person. "You're not the enemy, John," Bruce says, his voice softening into a low tectonic rumble. "You're just another part of the machine they forgot to oil. I'm not here to kill you. I'm here to break the tables so you don't have to be a weapon anymore." He drives the axe head into the concrete 6 inches from John's ear. The floor shatters. "Stay down. The next time we meet, I'll have taken out the foundation. You can decide then if you want to stand in the rubble or build something better." Bruce stands, his cape swirling around him like a shroud of smoke. He disappears into the dark of the warehouse, leaving the Baba Yaga in the dust of a philosophy he can no longer defend. The heart of the high tables economy does not beat in a boardroom. It hums in the subterranean gut of the New York Stock Exchange. Beneath the digital tickers and the frantic shouting of the trading floor lies a cold, vaulted silence. The Mint. This is where the physical architecture of power is forged. Gold melted down from the tribute of 1,000 criminal dynasties is pressed into the coins that buy loyalty, silence, and death. The X-veil filters the environment. 54 degrees Fahrenheit, sterile, pressurized air, and the rhythmic, hydraulic thud hiss of the coin presses. Bruce Wayne does not pick the lock on the 4-ton titanium vault door. He identifies the structural stress points of the hinges. He jams a high-tensile carbon steel wedge, forged in his own Gotham shop, into the gap between the door and the frame. He doesn't pull. He utilizes a portable hand-cranked hydraulic spreader. The metal screams, a high-frequency tectonic protest that vibrates through the bedrock of Manhattan. With a final bone-shaking crack, the locking bolts shear. The vault door doesn't swing open. It falls inward, 4 tons of dead weight flattening a pair of high-table sentries who hadn't even finished drawing their weapons. Bruce enters. He is a silhouette of matte black against a sea of shimmering, molten gold. In the center of the room, a massive crucible glows with the white-hot intensity of 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Automated arms move with robotic indifference, pouring the liquid sunlight into molds. Bruce watches the process for 3 seconds. He doesn't see wealth. He sees the lubricant of a machine that needs to seize. The remaining guards, the Mint Keepers, are not standard street-level hitters. They wear full-body, heat-resistant tactical armor and carry short-barreled, high-impact shotguns. They move in a staggered formation, their training demanding they protect the gold at all costs. Bruce doesn't wait for them to find their range. He unslings the felling axe, the hickory handle slick with the humidity of the foundry. The first Mint Keeper fires. The slug hits Bruce's left gauntlet, a reinforced bracer of scrapyard steel. He absorbs the recoil, utilizing the momentum to spin. The axe head, heavy and sharp enough to split a structural beam, catches the guard's shotgun mid-barrel. The steel of the weapon is cleaved in two. Bruce follows the arc, the back end of the axe head smashing into the guard's helmet. The reinforced glass shatters. The man's head snaps back with a kinetic force that suggests a total cervical collapse. Bruce is a whirlwind of industrial violence. He isn't fighting in the traditional sense. He is performing a demolition. He grabs a heavy iron-linked chain used for hoisting the gold ingots. With a guttural roar, he swings the 10-foot length of metal. It becomes a flail of sheer mass. The links shatter the tactical visors of the guards, the heavy iron crushing bone and Kevlar with every revolution. "The gold!" one guard screams into his comms. "He's going for the gold!" "I don't want the gold," Bruce rumbles. He reaches the main control console for the hydraulic presses. He doesn't hack the system. He pulls a heavy-duty sledgehammer from the back of his belt, a tool with a head made of high-density tungsten. He begins to systematically destroy the cooling lines. Clang. Hiss. Superheated steam erupts from the pipes, filling the vault with a blinding, searing fog. The X-veil tracks the atmospheric shift. Visibility drops to 0 for anyone without thermal imaging cowl sensors. To the guards, Bruce is a ghost in the steam. To Bruce, they are glowing orange targets of heat and frantic movement. He moves through the fog, the axe head rising and falling like the piston of a steam engine. There is no grace, only the efficiency of the forge. He strikes a guard through the chest, the blade bearing itself in the heavy armor. He doesn't pull it out. He uses the man's body as a shield, charging into the next 3 shooters. They fire blindly. The slugs tear through their own comrade. Bruce slams into them, a 300-pound wall of momentum that sends them flying into the cooling vats. Finally, Bruce stands before the great crucible. He looks at the lake of molten gold. He reaches for a large industrial-grade canister of liquid nitrogen he recovered from the Bowery King's supplies. He doesn't pour it. He throws the entire canister into the white-hot liquid. "Get back!" the lead supervisor screams, realizing the physics of what is about to happen. Bruce leaps behind a reinforced concrete pillar, wrapping his weighted shroud around himself. The explosion is not chemical, it is a rapid phase transition. The liquid nitrogen expands instantly, shattering the crucible and sending thousands of gallons of molten gold spraying outward like a solar flare. The gold hits the cold floor, the walls, and the remaining guards, instantly cooling into jagged, misshapen lumps of useless metal. The Mint is dead. The presses are frozen. The cooling lines are ruptured beyond repair. Bruce stands up from the rubble. His cape is singed, his cowl covered in a fine dust of powdered gold. He looks at the devastation. The systemic awakening is no longer a ripple. It is a cardiac arrest. The high table's currency just became a pile of scrap. He picks up his axe, the blade now tempered by the heat of the foundry. He looks at the security camera in the corner, knowing exactly who is watching on the other end. "The foundation is cracked," he says to the silent lens. "Start looking for a new home." The bronze doors of the New York Stock Exchange don't open. They are warped outward by a localized overpressure. Bruce Wayne steps into the light of a city that has been scrubbed of its civilians. The X-Veil pans across a desolate Broad Street. No taxis, no tourists, only the rhythmic, haunting thrum of a Blackhawk helicopter hovering low between the glass canyons, its searchlight cutting through the gold-dusted smoke clinging to Bruce's shroud. The high table has stopped pretending. This isn't an assassination anymore. It is a structural excision. 2 blocks of the financial district have been cordoned off by the Myrmidons. These aren't the suits of the Continental. They are the high table standing army. They wear interlocking ceramic composite plates, matte gray and angular, designed to deflect high-velocity rounds. They carry short-stroke piston rifles and thermobaric canisters. Bruce stops. He doesn't seek cover behind the Corinthian columns. He reaches into his belt and pulls out a heavy-duty magnetic induction coil, a tool for vibrating rusted bolts free. He slaps it onto the side of a parked armored transport. "I told you!" Bruce's voice carries through the tactical comms of every Myrmidon on the line. A low-frequency intrusion. "The foundation is cracked. You're just standing on the debris." He triggers the coil. The armored transport doesn't explode. It screams. The high-frequency vibration shatters every window within a 50-foot radius. The Myrmidons, their tactical headsets overloaded by the sonic spike, stumble. Bruce launches. He is a 300-pound kinetic slug. He hits the first line of Myrmidons before they can clear the static from their visors. He doesn't swing the axe yet. He uses the weighted shroud. He spins, the lead-lined hem of the cape becoming a centrifugal flail. It catches 3 soldiers across their chests, the impact sounding like a sledgehammer hitting a side of beef. They are lifted off their feet, their ceramic plates spider-webbing under the sheer blunt force trauma. Image, a tactical overlay of the street highlighting the kill zones Bruce is creating using environmental hazards. A Myrmidon sergeant recovers, leveling a 12-gauge breacher at Bruce's head. Bruce doesn't duck. He closes the distance in a single explosive stride, a mechanic's lunge. He grabs the barrel of the shotgun with a gauntleted hand, his grip strength exceeding 400 pounds per square inch. The steel tube crimps like a soda can. Bruce drives the butt of his felling axe into the sergeant's throat. The man's tactical gorget holds, but the kinetic energy is transferred directly into his larynx. He hits the pavement, gasping for air that can no longer reach his lungs. "Formation Delta!" a voice screams from the command vehicle. "Suppress and saturate! Burn him out!" Thermobaric canisters hiss through the air. Bruce looks up. He doesn't run away from the fire. He runs into the NYSE lobby. He grabs a heavy, brass-railed mahogany desk, 1,200 pounds of solid timber and metal, and kicks it toward the entrance. The canisters detonate. A wall of 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit pressure slams into the desk. The wood chars instantly, but the structural mass holds. Bruce is already behind the desk, using the thermal vacuum to mask his next move. He unslings the axe. He isn't looking for soldiers now. He's looking at the street. He sees the heavy-duty manhole cover for the main steam pipe junction. He sprints through the fading fire, his singed shroud trailing sparks. He jams the blade of the axe into the rim of the manhole and heaves. The cast-iron disc, weighing 250 pounds, is flipped into the air like a coin. A geyser of superheated 400 psi steam erupts from the ground. It creates a whiteout curtain of searing vapor that blinds the Myrmidon thermal sensors. In the whiteout, Bruce is a god of the forge. He moves by sound, the clatter of boots, the clicking of safeties. He appears behind a squad of 4. Crunch. The axe head buries itself in a ballistic shield, splitting the composite in 2. Bruce yanks the shield away, using it as a secondary blunt instrument to crush the skull of the soldier behind it. He is dismantling a battalion. By the time the steam clears, 30 myrmidons are down. The street is a graveyard of unbreakable armor and high-end tactical gear. Bruce stands in the center of the intersection, his chest heaving, his cowl slick with a mixture of rain, oil, and blood. The Blackhawk above tilts, its minigun spinning up with a mechanical whine. Bruce doesn't look for cover. He looks at the helicopter. He reaches into his belt for a high-tension steel cable and a magnetic grappling head, not for climbing, but for anchoring. "My turn," he rumbles. At this precise moment, the viewer's thumb hovers exactly 2 millimeters above the screen. To the untrained eye, this is mere hesitation. However, on a neurological level, a violent conflict is taking place within the prefrontal cortex. The viewer is currently processing the auditory data stream, a synthetic voice so optimized for narrative delivery that it bypasses standard skepticism and stimulates the imagination directly. The dopamine receptors are firing. The immersion is absolute. Yet a fatal error in logic is about to occur. The viewer operates under the assumption that the algorithm will naturally return them to this channel. This is a statistical miscalculation. Without the tactile confirmation of the subscribe function, the probability of retrieving this specific narrative frequency drops by 84.7% within the next 48 hours. The creator, dependent on this metric to fuel the AI generation engine, waits in a state of suspended anticipation. There are 2 distinct timelines ahead. In the first, the viewer scrolls away. The story ends here, lost to the entropic chaos of the feed. In the second, the viewer exerts a mere 0.5 newtons of force. The connection is solidified. The production of future chapters is guaranteed. The choice is not merely about support, it is a tactical decision to ensure the survival of the story itself. Do not hesitate. Correct the timeline. Subscribe! Back to the story. The Blackhawk's minigun begins its high-speed cyclonic whistle, the 6 barrels spinning into a blur of predatory intent. 7.62 millimeter rounds begin to stitch a jagged, sparking line across the marble facade of the NYSE, pulverizing stone into a white choking dust. Bruce Wayne does not seek the interior. He understands the structural geometry of the street. He knows that the helicopter's pilot is overcorrecting for the wind shear between the buildings. He waits for the precise moment the tail rotor dips, a 2-degree oscillation caused by a downdraft. He fires the magnetic grappling head. The high-tension steel cable hissed as it unspooled from his forearm winch, a silver needle threading the dark. The magnet, a neodymium core industrial salvage, thundered against the helicopter's landing skid with a metallic clack that echoed even over the roar of the rotors. Bruce doesn't pull. He anchors. He wraps the trailing end of the cable around a cast-iron bollard deeply embedded in 3 feet of reinforced concrete. The Blackhawk attempts to bank. The pilot, blinded by the steam and the glare of his own searchlight, applies full collective. The turbine screams as it fights against the physics of a fixed point. For a microsecond, the cable sings, a high-pitched, lethal vibration that cuts through the rain. Then, the bollard holds. The structural integrity of the landing skid does not. The skid shears off with a violent, screeching snap of aluminum and rivets. The sudden loss of tension sends the Blackhawk into a catastrophic, dynamic rollover. The main rotors strike the side of a glass office building, shattering 4 floors of windows in a cascading waterfall of crystalline shards. The aircraft pirouettes, a dying firefly of aviation fuel and jagged metal, before slamming nose first into the high-table checkpoint at the end of the block. The explosion is a blossoming orange lotus of pressurized fuel. The shock wave ripples through the puddles, a concentric ring of displaced water. The Myrmidon reinforcements, caught in the blast radius, are erased in a flash of thermal kinetic energy. Bruce stands in the center of the street, the severed cable coiling at his feet like a dead snake. He is a silhouette against the inferno. He turns his back on the fire, his boots crunching on the glass. The false zenith is complete. He has proven that even the table's wings can be clipped by a man with a wrench and a plan. Bruce retreats into the bowels of a decommissioned subway maintenance hub beneath Canal Street. The X-Veil shifts into a high-texture audio mode, the rhythmic drip hiss of a leaking pipe, the metallic clink of tools being laid out on a rusted workbench, and the wet, heavy thud of Bruce's shroud hitting the floor. He is stripped to the waist. His torso is a brutalist map of history, thick rope scars across the ribs, a jagged crater from a ricochet on his collarbone, and the deep purple bloom of fresh hematomas from the Myrmidon's blunt force weaponry. A shadow moves at the edge of the light. The Bowery King enters carrying a thermos of what smells like burnt chicory and gasoline. He is accompanied by the TikTok man, who is obsessively winding a pocket watch. "You look like a man who tried to fight a building and won," the king says, his voice a low, raspy chuckle. He pours a cup of the black liquid and sets it on the workbench. The high table is currently having a collective stroke. You've turned the financial district into a scrapyard. Bruce doesn't look up. He is using a pair of needle-nose pliers to pull a ceramic shard out of his forearm. His breath is steady, a rhythmic bellows. Hiss, pull, clink. "They're fragile," Bruce rumbles. "They rely on the illusion of being untouchable. You break the glass, and they don't know how to handle the wind." "Fragile?" The king gestures vaguely toward the ceiling. "They have 3,000 years of momentum, giant. You just destroyed their mint and downed their bird. They aren't going to send more soldiers. They're going to send the idea of death." "I've met the idea of death," Bruce says. He picks up the cup of coffee. He takes a sip, his face remaining a mask of granite. "It tastes like bad coffee." The TikTok man jitters, his eyes darting to the shadows. "The adjudicator, she's called for the elder, the man in the sand. He doesn't like it when the clock stops ticking." "Let him come," Bruce says. He sets the cup down and picks up a heavy-duty needle and industrial thread. He begins to stitch the tear in his shroud, his movements precise and mechanical. "I need more thermite, and the structural schematics for the Continental sub-basement. Not the maps you gave me, the real ones. The ones that show the load-bearing supports for the vault." The Bowery King leans against a rusted pillar, watching the Batman work. "You're a strange creature. You don't want the power. You don't want the money. You just want to see the machine stop." "I want it to work right," Bruce corrects. He bites the thread, the sound sharp in the quiet of the tunnels. "In my world, the machine is broken beyond repair. Here, it's just being run by the wrong people. You want to be a king? Start thinking like an engineer. Stop looking at the throne and start looking at the foundation." The king smiles, a slow, predatory baring of teeth. "TikTok, get the man his maps. I think I'd like to see what happens when the foundation finally gives way." The Bowery's maintenance hub, once a sanctuary of stagnant shadow, is suddenly pierced by a frequency that does not belong to the subway's electrical hum. It is a high-pitched harmonic chime, the sound of ancient silver striking resonant stone. The X-Veil detects a sudden drop in the local ambient temperature. 4.2 degrees Fahrenheit lost in 11 seconds. The shadows don't just shift, they breathe. The Fallen have arrived. These are not the High Table's modern tactical units. They are the ancestral shadow guard of the Elder, warriors whose lineage predates the invention of gunpowder. They wear traditional Ruska Roma combat shrouds woven with flexible, micro-linked chainmail and carry crescent hooks, wicked curved blades designed to find the gaps in heavy plate armor. "They found the seam," Bruce rumbles. He doesn't reach for his axe. He reaches for a heavy-duty, industrial-grade CO2 fire extinguisher and a roll of high-tensile copper wire. The first Fallen strikes from the ceiling. He doesn't fall. He glides, the micro-links of his shroud making a sound like 1,000 disturbed vipers. The crescent hook whistles through the air, aimed precisely at the exposed seam of Bruce's sutured shoulder. Bruce pivots on his heel, his center of gravity shifting with the calculated torque of a heavy-duty crane. He doesn't block the blade. He strikes the valve of the fire extinguisher against a rusted support pillar. A pressurized cloud of freezing CO2 erupts, instantly flash freezing the moisture in the air. The Fallen warrior, caught mid-glide, is blinded by the thermal shock. Bruce doesn't punch him. He grabs the man's lead-weighted hem and uses the warrior's own momentum to slam him headfirst into a high-voltage transformer box. The electrical arc illuminates the hub in a strobe light of violent blue. 50,000 volts surge through the Fallen's chainmail. The man doesn't scream. His nervous system simply ceases to function as the X-Veil records the smell of ozone in charred silk. Tick-tock, get the civilians to the secondary sump pump level. The Bowery King bellows, drawing a heavy .45. "They're in the walls, Giant. They're in the damn walls." 3 more Fallen materialize from the darkness. They don't attack one by one. They move in a triad sweep, a 3-pointed pincer movement designed to overwhelm a single target's peripheral vision. They are fast, their movements fluid and biological, a direct contrast to Bruce's mechanical, industrial efficiency. Bruce realizes the felling axe is too slow for this geometry. He drops it. He reaches into his tool belt and pulls out a pair of heavy-duty, spring-loaded bolt cutters. To anyone else, it's a tool. To Bruce, it's a dual-levered crushing instrument with 4,000 pounds of cutting force at the tip. He intercepts the first crescent hook with the hardened steel jaws of the cutters. Snap. The ancient silver blade is sheared in half like a dry twig. Bruce drives the handle of the tool into the second warrior's solar plexus, then whips the copper wire around the third warrior's ankle. He isn't just fighting, he is grounding the threat. He yanks the wire, pulling the third Fallen into a pool of oily water just as a secondary electrical arc from the transformer hits the surface. The water erupts in a spray of steam and kinetic discharge. "You're not fighting soldiers," the Bowery King shouts over the din, firing his .45 into a shadow that was moving too fast to be human. "These are the Elder's ghosts. They don't fear pain. They don't fear death." "Everything has a breaking strain," Bruce grunts. He is sweating now. The exertion of moving 260 pounds of armored mass against hyper-fast opponents beginning to tax his 45% stamina. Even ghosts have a structural limit. The leader of the Fallen, a man whose mask is a terrifying, lacquered skull, steps into the dim light. He holds a long, thin needle blade coated in a dark, viscous liquid. Neurotoxin. A single scratch would bypass Bruce's armor and shut down his respiratory system in 90 seconds. The Skull Leader moves with a rhythmic, hypnotic sway. He isn't looking for an opening. He is waiting for Bruce's heart rate to peak. Bruce stands his ground. He looks at the ceiling. Above them is the massive cast-iron main for the city's water supply. a 48-inch pipe under 200 pounds of pressure. He identifies the primary rivet, already stressed by decades of neglect. "You think you're ghosts," Bruce says, his voice a low, vibrating growl. "But you're just mass in a confined space, and I own the space." He launches his last magnetic grappling head, not at the leader, but at the pipe's main support bracket. The magnet bites. Bruce triggers the winch. The bracket screams as it is torn from the masonry. The 48-inch main groans, the cast iron reaching its ultimate tensile strength. With a sound like a thunderclap in a cathedral, the pipe bursts. A wall of pressurized water, thousands of gallons per second, slams into the maintenance hub. It isn't a flood, it's a physical weight. The fallen, designed for speed and agility, are swept away like leaves in a storm, their light frames unable to resist the raw, hydraulic force. Bruce anchors himself to a load-bearing pillar, his weighted shroud acting as a keel in the rushing water. He watches as the skull leader is pinned against a rusted grate by the sheer pressure, the neurotoxin needle blade lost in the torrent. The water begins to drain into the lower sumps, leaving the hub slick with silt and broken silver. The apex hunt has been neutralized not by superior swordsmanship, but by the calculated release of the city's own potential energy. Bruce unlatches himself from the pillar. He is soaked, his armor covered in rust water, his lungs burning for air. He looks at the Bowery king, who is standing on a crate, his whiskey glass surprisingly still in one hand. "The Elder is here," Bruce says, spitting out a mouthful of grit. "That was just the audit. The demolition is next." Bruce stands at the very nadir of the Continental's architecture, where the building's bedrock-anchored pylons descend into the dark, wet earth of Manhattan. The X-veil filters the environment, 98% humidity, the ancient, briny smell of the original coastline, and the rhythmic, high-pressure hiss of the A-train line vibrating through the adjacent tunnel wall. This is the anatomical root of the High Table's power in New York, a place where sacred geometry meets raw engineering. He isn't wearing the shroud anymore. It's too heavy, saturated with silt and oil. He is down to his base thermal layer and the scarred polymer of his tactical harness. His torso is a mosaic of trauma, fading hematomas, angry red abrasions, and a slow, leaking puncture from a fallen's overlooked needle blade on his left obliques. The neurotoxin, severely diluted by the hydraulic flood, is manifesting as a localized tremor and a cold, acid-burn sensation spreading across his ribs. Bruce studies the three massive, reinforced concrete and I-beam supports that hold up the 60-story tower above him. He doesn't look at them as pillars. He looks at them as the skeletal system of an enemy that must be paralyzed. He unslings the felling axe one last time. Its hickory handle is cracked, its edge chipped, but its center of gravity remains perfect. He doesn't swing at the concrete, he swings at the primary grounding cable, a thick weave of copper and lead designed to protect the hotel from both electrical surges and scrying. Crack. The cable snaps, releasing a shower of blue sparks that illuminate the damp sub-basement. Bruce reaches into his tool belt and pulls out a dozen custom-engineered thermal charges. They aren't explosive, they are incendiary. They utilize a thermite plasma composite that burns at 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to turn high-density rebar into liquid slag in 90 seconds. He begins to place them with architectural precision around the base of the primary load-bearing pylon. He doesn't want to topple the building. He wants to induce a catastrophic structural failure that will drop the entire Continental 10 stories into the subway tunnels, crushing the High Table's myth under its own weight. He clicks the final charge into place. The neurotoxin in his system flares, a cold spike of panic attempting to override his cognitive logic. His heart rate peaks at 180 beats per minute. He fights it. He focuses on the arithmetic of destruction. A rhythmic, dry chuckle echoes from the shadows near the sump pump entrance. It isn't the gravel grind of the Bowery King, nor the tired rasp of John Wick. It is a high-frequency mocking sound, the sound of a man who views chaos not as a threat, but as a masterpiece. My, the voice sings, each word wrapped in theatrical velvet and jagged glass. An architect of apocalypse, an engineer of oblivion, and here I thought I was the only one who appreciated the poetry of a well-placed structural crack. A figure steps into the strobing light of the severed grounding cable. He is a walking, laughing fracture of the Wick versus aesthetic. He wears a custom-tailored suit that might have once been pristine white, but is now a chaotic tie-dye of primary colors and blood splatter. His face is hidden behind a lacquered ceramic mask that is an expression of absolute unbridled mania. A wide, impossibly stretched red smile, cut into a field of stark white, with empty, joyful eyes that reflect the sparks. He holds a silver cane topped with a heavy, diamond-studded question mark. This is the architect of the empty stage, a variant of the Joker who viewed the high-status, highly structured violence of the high table as boring, stale, and in desperate need of a punchline. He has been watching Bruce's path of destruction through the city, and he is positively delighted. Winston, oh, Winston, he's up there, in his little glass castle, sipping his little drinks, thinking he can manage the narrative. The architect tittering, tapping his cane against the pylon. He thinks his rules are absolute, but you are the variable. You are the kinetic insult that this tired joke of a world needed. Bruce doesn't answer. He finishes wiring the detonator. The tremors from the neurotoxin are intensifying, but his resolve is a static line of intent. He picks up the axe, gripping it with numb fingers. The architect spins his cane, the diamond tip gleaming. But here's the problem, little birdie. If you drop this building, you kill the game. And I love the game. I love watching them run around in their little suits, following their little markers. They're so serious. They have no sense of comedic timing. The masked villain closes the distance in a series of chaotic, rhythmic hops. He doesn't attack with traditional combat geometry. He moves with a kinetic, unpredictable jazz flow. The X-Veil tracks his movement, a 1.2-second oscillation of mass that makes targeting his center impossible. He swings the heavy cane, the diamond tip aimed at the fresh puncture wound in Bruce's obliques. Bruce parries with the axe handle, the impact jarring his entire skeletal system. The architect utilizes the rebound to strike with his other hand, which holds a small, pressurized canister. Hiss. A cloud of vibrant, emerald green vapor hits Bruce in the face. It isn't neurotoxin. It's a specialized formulation of smile gas, a psychoreactive stimulant designed to bypass biological defenses and overwhelm the limbic system with a surge of uncontrolled, painful dopamine. Smile, birdie. Laugh at the audacity of the algorithm. The architect laughs, his voice cracking with sadistic joy. Laugh at the rules you're trying to break, because when you break the foundation, you're just building my stage. Bruce stumbles back, his cal sensors overloaded. He doesn't inhale the gas, but the skin absorption is immediate. The dopamine flood hits his brain, a blinding explosion of synthetic joy that conflicts violently with the neurotoxin's cold despair. He is trapped in an ontological deadlock. His body is a war zone between two different philosophies of horror, while his mind attempts to hold on to the single, logical thought, push the button. The architect steps back, raising his arms like a conductor preparing for the grand finale. He isn't fighting to win. He is fighting to maximize the artistic impact of the collapse. He wants Bruce to drop the building, but only after he has surrendered his logic to the chaos. Winston, standing at the apex of the Continental in his penthouse, looks down at a singular red light blinking on his master console. Structural malfunction. Lower foundation. He looks out at the rainy Manhattan skyline, knowing that his entire empire is currently hanging by the single, vibrating thread of a man's will in the dark. The sub-basement of the Continental has become a localized rupture in reality. The X-Veil struggles to maintain a coherent feed. The frame rate of observation stutters, synchronizing with the erratic, rhythmic pulse of the neon sparks and the chemical green fog. Bruce Wayne is no longer an engineer. He is a glitch. The smile gas and the fallen neurotoxin are currently performing a chemical civil war inside his blood-brain barrier. The dopamine surge forces his facial muscles into a horrific, jagged grin beneath the cowl, while the neurotoxin attempts to paralyze his lungs. His heart rate is a staccato mess of 190 beats per minute. To Bruce, the world is shifting between a sterile, high-table boardroom and a charnel house where the furniture is made of bone. "Oh, look at you," the architect sings, dancing around a load-bearing pylon. He strikes a rhythmic beat against the concrete with his diamond-tipped cane. Clack, clack, clack. The big bad builder is finally realizing the joke. The foundation isn't stone, Brucey. It's absurdity. The architect lunges. The cane tip, sharpened to a monomolecular point, whistles toward Bruce's throat. Crack. The sound of a compensated P-30L muzzle climb breaks the manic rhythm. A .45 ACP round shears the diamond head off the architect's cane. John Wick enters the sub-basement from the service tunnel. He is a mess of charcoal gray wool and dried blood. His movement a mechanical, low-bore precision that contrasts violently with the architect's jazz chaos. John doesn't speak. He doesn't offer a quip. He simply enters a press-check stance and fires again. The architect tumbles backward, his manic laughter turning into a shrill, delighted shriek. The Baba Yaga, the straight man, arrives to save the lead. How classic, how derivative. John ignores him. His eyes flick to Bruce, who is slumped against the primary pylon, his fingers twitching inches from the detonator. "Get it done," John rasps, his voice a dry scrape of tectonic plates. "I'll hold the stage." The next 60 seconds are a masterclass in action apex geometry. John Wick engages the architect in a hyper-compressed gun-fu versus chaos flow duel. The architect doesn't fight like a man. He moves like a broken film reel. He throws a handful of razor-edge playing cards, each one weighted with a microcharge, that explode against the concrete. John rolls, utilizing the recoil of his H&K to propel himself through the green fog, firing 3-round bursts that the architect evades by inches through sheer erratic luck. Bruce, trapped in the neurological deadlock, feels the world through tactile vibrations. He feels the thrum of the A-train. He feels the clack of John's boots. He forces his hand toward the detonator. His fingers feel like they belong to a different machine. Rusted, seizing, failing. Push. The button. "No, no, no!" the architect screams, abandoning his duel with John. He ignores a bullet grazing his shoulder and lunges for Bruce. He pulls a long, jagged scalpel scepter from his sleeve. "The punchline is mine. I decide when the curtain falls." John Wick slides across the wet floor, his hand reaching for a discarded length of heavy-duty copper wire. He whips it around the architect's ankle, yanking the clown back just as the scalpel scepter was inches from Bruce's heart. The architect hits the ground, his lacquered mask cracking against the concrete. For a split second, the manic smile is replaced by a look of genuine, cold-eyed fury. Bruce finds the wire. It isn't a heroic moment, it is a blue-collar moment. He doesn't look up, he doesn't make a speech. He utilizes the last 2% of his motor control to bridge the two exposed copper leads of the detonator. "The permits," Bruce whispers, his voice a wet, dopamine-fueled croak, "have been revoked." He taps the leads together. The thermal charges do not detonate with a bang. They ignite with a silent, blinding, white-hot intensity. 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit of thermite plasma instantly liquefies the base of the three primary pylons. The X-Veil records the sound of 100,000 tons of structural steel reaching its melting point. The sub-basement groans. It is a deep planetary sound. The Continental is no longer a building. It is a weight without a support. "Oh," the architect whispers, looking up as the ceiling begins to sag. Finally, a real set piece. John Wick grabs Bruce by the tactical harness, dragging the semi-catatonic giant toward the service tunnel as the first 10 feet of the Continental Hotel begins to slide into the earth. The sound of 60 stories of luxury and rules being reclaimed by the mud is a roar that drowns out the laughter of the madman and the screams of the elite above. The paradigm has shattered. The center of the Wickverse is currently sinking into a hole in the ground. The collapse of the Continental is not a singular event. It is a structural funeral. The X-Veil observes the physics of the vacuum, 60 stories of marble, blood-stained velvet, and high-tensile steel descending into the earth at 9.8 meters per second squared. The sound is a bass-heavy tectonic roar that vibrates the very marrow of New York City. As the skyscraper settles into the Manhattan schist, it creates a pressure wave of pulverized concrete and gold-leaf dust that rolls through the financial district like a gray tsunami. The high table has lost its anchor. The global narrative has suffered a compound fracture. Image, a satellite thermal view of Manhattan, showing a black hole of heat and structural data where the Continental once stood. The X-Veil pans across the global theater. In Paris, the Marquis de Gramont stares at a flickering monitor as the New York node status turns from amber to a void black null. In Osaka, the Shimazu clan begins to burn their ledgers, sensing the shift in the wind. The rules were a bridge. Absolute Batman just burned the pylons. In the jagged, smoking crater where the lobby once sat, the dust begins to settle. John Wick emerges from a ruptured service grate, his charcoal suit shredded into gray ribbons. He is dragging 300 pounds of unconscious, toxin-shattered Bruce Wayne. John's breathing is a rhythmic, wet rattle. He stops at the edge of the debris, looking back at the ruin of the only world he ever knew. "It's gone, John," a voice rasps from the top of a twisted I-beam. Winston emerges from the wreckage of his private elevator, clutching a leather-bound ledger, the high table's New York registry. He looks older, his impeccably tailored silhouette now a ghost in the limestone dust. He isn't looking at John. He is looking at the man-mountain slumped at John's feet. "He didn't just kill the men," Winston whispers, a strange, terrifying awe in his voice. "He killed the contract. There is no table without the house. There is no house without the foundation." Suddenly, the systemic subtext shifts from panic to anarchy. The X-Veil detects thousands of encrypted pings across the city. Every assassin, every tracker, every mid-tier hitter in New York just received the same notification. Status, Excommunicado, all parties. Protocol, void. The high table's immune system has suffered an autoimmune collapse. Without a central node to verify markers or process gold, the assassins are no longer employees. They are starving predators in a cage with no locks. Image: a digital ripple map showing the collapse of the high table's credit system across 5 continents. "The world is going to burn tonight, isn't it?" John asks, his hand tightening on a discarded kimber. "No," Winston says, looking down at the ledger before dropping it into the flickering fires of the pit. "The world is going to work. For the first time in 300 years, the workers aren't being told where to stand. They're going to have to build their own doors." Bruce Wayne's hand twitches. The smile gas is fading into a cold, crushing migraine. He opens his eyes, the pupils blown wide, reflecting the orange glow of the burning wreckage. He looks at the crater. He doesn't see a victory. He sees a site that needs to be cleared for new construction. "The Elder?" Bruce croaks, the dopamine-induced grin finally sagging into his natural, grim line of intent. "Is he?" "The Elder is a myth, Mr. Wayne," Winston says, turning to walk into the dark of the smoke. "And myths don't survive 10-story drops into a subway line. You've left a permanent stain on the fabric of our reality. I hope you're prepared to live with the mess you've made." Bruce grunts, forcing himself to a seated position. He looks at John Wick, 2 men broken by different versions of the same machine, sitting in the rubble of an empire. "We need..." Bruce coughs, spitting out a glob of gray dust. "To find a shovel." The dust over Manhattan has finally lost its kinetic energy. It no longer billows. It settles, coating the ruins of the financial district in a fine gray shroud of pulverized history. The X-Veil transitions into a high-fidelity, low-frequency audio sweep. The distant, rhythmic clink-clink of cooling rebar, the hiss of a ruptured steam line, and the heavy, uneven breathing of 2 men who have outlived their own myths. Bruce Wayne stands at the edge of the crater. He is stripped of his cowl now, his face a landscape of sweat-streaked grime and deep purple contusions. The smile gas has left a lingering, chemical bitterness on his tongue, but his eyes have regained their cold, tectonic clarity. He is no longer the invader. He is the architect of a void. John Wick stands beside him, leaning heavily on a piece of warped, structural steel. He looks at his hands, shaking, blackened with carbon and dried blood. For the first time in 20 years, there is no gold coin in his pocket. There is no marker. There is only the weight of the air. "You're leaving," John rasps. It isn't a question. He senses the atmospheric shift, the way the physics around Bruce are beginning to vibrate, a localized distortion as the multiverse prepares to reclaim its displaced mass. "The work here is done," Bruce rumbles. His voice is a low, vibrating bass that seems to come from the earth itself. The machine is broken, but a vacuum is just an invitation for a worse architect. Image: a high-contrast silhouette of the 2 men against the rising sun, their shadows stretching across the debris of the Continental. John looks at the jagged horizon of the city. Without the high table's curated order, the silence is terrifying. They don't know how to be free, Bruce. They only know how to be used. As soon as you're gone, someone will pick up the pieces. Someone will try to build a new table. Bruce reaches into the last intact pouch of his tactical harness. He doesn't pull out a weapon. He pulls out a heavy, industrial-grade graphite pencil and a crumpled, grease-stained sheet of structural vellum, the last of his Gotham blueprints. He hands them to John. "Don't give them a table," Bruce says, his gaze locking onto John's with the force of a hydraulic press. "Give them a foundation. These aren't just maps of the tunnels. They're schematics for decentralized infrastructure, water, power, communication. If the people own the marrow of the city, they don't need to sell their souls for a room in a hotel. John takes the vellum. His fingers trace the precise, brutalist lines of Bruce's handiwork. It isn't a contract, it's a manual for autonomy. "You're giving me a city to build," John says, a faint, weary ghost of a smile touching his lips. "I'm a hitman, Bruce. I break things." "Then break the cycle," Bruce replies. The air around Bruce begins to hum, a high-pitched harmonic resonance that makes the dust dance in the air. The X-Veil detects the onset of a trans-dimensional anchor pull. The light begins to bleed out of the scene, turning Bruce into a shimmering, monochromatic ghost of iron and intent. "One last thing," John says, raising his voice over the rising roar of the rift. "What do I tell them when they ask who did this? Who tore it all down?" Bruce Wayne looks back at the ruin of the Continental, then at the man he is leaving behind. "Tell them the Foreman was here," Bruce rumbles, "and tell them the next time I come back, I'm checking the welds." With a sudden, soundless implosion of kinetic energy, the space where Bruce Wayne stood becomes a vacuum. The dust rushes in to fill the hole. John Wick stands alone in the crater of the old world. He looks down at the blueprints in his hand, then at the morning sun hitting the Hudson River. He tucks the vellum into his shredded suit jacket, picks up a discarded hammer from the rubble, and begins to walk toward the Bowery. The permanent stain remains. The high table is dead. The era of the architect has begun. The narrative thread has reached its terminus. The current timeline stabilizes, and the audio transmission ends here. But the portal never truly closes. It only waits for the next divergence. To ensure you are present when reality fractures again, you must align with the signal. Subscribe to What If Portal Comics. It is the only way to guarantee your passage into the next chapter. The archives are vast, and another world is already waiting for your observation on the screen. The next jump is yours to make. For now, let the static fade. Enjoy the music in this moment of stillness while you decide your next destination. See you in the next reality.